Hey, Bob with Million Mile Garage. Welcome to our forgotten, neglected duster video. Although not really that forgotten, but just to give you a scoop on what we're doing here. This is a car stalling and gear video, applicable for Duster, Dart, Demon, Valiant type scenarios. Um, Giving the background on the car, we've had it in the family since it was about 9 months old, so we've had it since '74. And I would say over the last decade, it kind of transitioned from being a daily driver to being something that was only used occasionally. As you know, life goes on, kids, work, moving from Florida to Alabama, all those things. So the last 3 years, it's probably only been started every couple of months. We did loan it out to a movie crew last year that shot a movie with it, and it did spend a couple of nights in a cemetery idling all night. And it was actually running okay-ish, and I just had the idle turned up because I wasn't sure if it was the alternator or what it was. But the typical problem, if you're running all the accessories at once and you put it in gear, sometimes it will stop running. It'll just quit on you. And it's one of those things where, we mostly drive the car during the day, so if you're not running all the accessories, it's not a problem. But if you're driving it at night and maybe you need to run the heater and you're running the blower on high, things like that, it would get a little nervous when it was in gear. So we're going to show you start to finish what I did to troubleshoot this. We broke it down into two parts, but please hit like and subscribe, bookmark it, do whatever you have to do. Maybe this will kind of show you what a lot of people have talked about on the internet. There's half of you that are going to say right off, oh, it's carburetor ignition. The other half are going to say, hey, clean the bulkhead connectors, clean your main battery feed, check all your grounds, all of those things. Or maybe, the ones that just say it's the alternator. We're going to cover all of this. So this is maybe kind of a how-to video, a how not to video, and what this guy did video. So thanks for watching, and I hope it's helpful.
Hard bass.
Voltage check reveals we have a healthy battery before we start doing any of our tests. Okay, operating at 900 to 950 in park. You can see she's making a little juice at idle. Now if I go put the air conditioning on and then give it full power, still doing okay-ish at 900, but when I put her in gear and then we drop it around to looks like maybe 550. Now we're running at a slight discharge, and then if I put the lights on, now we're really running an amperage deficit. Looks like she's drawing 20 amps instead of putting out a few amps at an idle. And it doesn't take very long for that to start to flatten the battery. Sometimes the voltage drops low enough that the engine will actually stop running. You see she's already starting to sputter a little bit. It doesn't like it. But putting it into park and letting it run up to like 900, not running much of a deficit, and then just bring it up to 1,000 engine RPMs. You can see we're not running at a deficit anymore. Even with the lights on, turn the lights off, there's a huge difference. So let's see what happens when we put the Tough Stuff alternator in, which is rated at the same 60 amps that the rebuilder style alternator that's in there. And I haven't had good luck with those over the years. They seem to work okay off idle, but any type of current draw on it, it really seems to flatten out the battery. So side by side, right off I can tell the Tough Stuff 60 amp alternator has thicker windings than the factory Mopar rebuilt 60 amp alternator. You can see the windings are considerably thicker. Coming over here, there's a huge difference. So significantly more windings.
So, but since the amperage output is the same, I'm hoping that that means the idle output will be higher. A lot of times with these Mopar alternators, a lot of them will advertise like 90 or 100 amps. The idle amps may actually be lower than what a stock 60 amp would be. So they also required me to put a 10 gauge ground wire right here, which the stock one doesn't have.
So two problems, just to bolt in an alternator. Aftermarket's always got to be different, right? So you take your spacer, you press it out, the same one that's probably been reused 10 times, 15 times over the almost 50 years we've had this car in the family, and what happens? This one doesn't fit. So then if you want to take your spacer and set it in here, guess what happens when you try to put it in the car? It falls out. So they had this monstrosity pressed in, and I guess what they're expecting you to do is to take this and cut it to length to fit, because obviously you can't just have this pressed in all the way, because then it's not gonna keep these ears from collapsing when you tighten it down in the car. So either I guess spread this one out, or I guess the idea is to cut this to length. I don't know. I mean, there's no instructions that come with it. You try to look it up on their website. There's nothing. And then trying to get these adjustment screws to go in. They put so much of this cast plus finish stuff. It got in all the threads. I can't get the bolt started on the adjuster down here where I need it. I was able to get it to go in here, and I tell you, it turned over kind of hard. I actually felt like I was going to strip the threads, and it went in a little hard. It's going in now, but I actually need the other adjustment hole. I'm having trouble getting it to go in. I'm almost going to have to run a tap through it or something just so I can get the fastener to go in. Unbelievable. Yeah, I ran it in, and it goes in tight. But it is taking the coating off. At least hopefully so I can get this started maybe. Good grief. There we go. At least it'll go in. Yeah, now I can just compress this in, and that should stay in place. Yeah, she just slid right in. You got maybe, what, 20 thousandths on each side to compress, maybe a little more than that. That one's that should press up just fine. If it's pretty much like the other one did, I don't think we'll have any issues there. Yeah, so with it in park at 1,000 again, she's charging, but if I put the AC on, put the fan on high, and put the headlights on, but as soon as I come off idle, or high idle, and then putting it in gear, it just brings it right down. She's almost stalling. You just give it a little gas. You just got to keep the RPMs up at least to 800-900. But you look at the deficit we're running. It barely runs. But shut the air off. Shut the lights off. There we go, and it's marginal. So it looks like the Tough Stuff 65 amp alternator was not the solution for this car's problem. In fact, I think it produces 3 or 4 fewer amps in gear than the stock $40 Advance Auto rebuilt alternator put out. So I'm going to have to look at other things that are causing this car to stall while it's in gear. Possibly a low voltage situation, maybe carburetor. We're chasing an electrical problem with the Duster, and it's something that's gotten gradually worse over the years. And it's gotten to the point that if you're running all the accessories with the car in gear, it actually does not have enough voltage to keep the fire lit. So we were just kind of going around doing a real quick, simple thing. And on the Chrysler stuff, I like to be redundant. I run 2 power wires, and of course that's the main feed, and it jumps off with a starter relay, and then you got the big heavy 10 or 12 gauge wire coming off of that, and then it goes through the firewall. And actually, I've done a bypass years ago. That black wire is actually the main battery feed going through the bulkhead connector where I've drilled it out, and there's the feed coming from the alternator. It's also a heavy 10 or 12 gauge wire. So this wire right here is basically ambient. It's about the same temperature as me, so I can aim that little dot right on it. You see it's only like 92 degrees. What's perplexing though is this extra pigtail that came with this particular terminal that I bought at Pep Boys years ago. It's got a real spindly little wire coming off of it that's probably, it looks like it's maybe 12 or 14 gauge versus this larger wire, which is 10 or 12. But it's actually too hot for me to touch, so I'll put my hand behind it just to shield so I don't get a bounce off the headers. But yeah, it's almost 200 degrees. And actually, if you come up here in the joint where it gets really hot, yeah, it's approaching 190. Maybe down here you get a better picture. It's too hot to touch. It's like it's really hot. So I'm not sure why, but there seems to be a break between point A up here and point B down here, and they're both tied into the same terminal lug. I don't understand why it's taking the path of least resistance, which is the tiny wire with the terrible joint. So we're going to have to troubleshoot that. But I think we found our problem. It's kind of frustrating. We put an alternator on it and some other stuff or something stupid. But every time I run over and touch this red wire, I'm like, this wire's not getting warm. So I mean, it must be doing its job. But the reality is, I didn't think to touch the other wire. The only reason I didn't snip it off is it was just easier just to leave it on the terminal and just put the redundant one on. I figured if one of them fails, that way it doesn't leave you walking. It looks like that's the case here, but it actually was not letting enough current to come through to keep the fire lit on the engine. Sometimes it would actually stall with it in gear. With all the accessories off, turning the steering wheel, it actually would just quit running. So I didn't know if it was, coil, ignition control module, what it is, but I could tell that it was, putting out just about 0 amps when it was in gear, which I know those alternators aren't the best. Okay, with the one wire disconnected that didn't have any juice at all, the main feed, I'm just going to run the accessories again with the blower on high, so we're drawing some amps, and that way we don't have to run the engine in the garage with the door down right now. And we're just going to take our positive lead here, and we're just going to grab that wire down there and hit that and see what we got for voltage drop. Oh, that again. Yeah, we're 0.3 of a volt on a piece of wire that's like maybe a foot long. So we know that's a problem. We'll get in there and clean that just a little more, but that actually doesn't look bad. I buffed the tops of the nuts because they were pretty grungy, and I think I just wasn't getting a good contact up here, as well as I cleaned the lug down here on the starter relay. So we'll just hook all that back up. Okay, with the wire cleaned and connected, let's just check voltage drop right here real quick. Come right in, right there. We can either just grab the top of that bolt, or we can just, touch those two wires. And now we're down to, 0.01. So that's like 100th of a volt drop. I got to set the 20 volts. That's just this, I think the scale I have on this one. And again, I'm not an electronics whiz, but there's a big difference between, I think we had like 0.36 and now we have 0.01. So huge difference there. That was definitely a problem. And just for the heck of it, I'm just going to come in right here and just pointing down here, I just want to show you where the ground is on the firewall. Putting my finger right there. And I cleaned that up really good too. And I did the same thing on these terminals up here. I cleaned those off really good. Now I do have a double stack here, which I probably shouldn't. This one's going over to that new Tough Stuff alternator. They like to have a negative ground, so I kind of double grounded it just to be on the safe side. But I'll probably remove that because I think you get a little bit of a resistance buildup when you start stacking too many terminal lugs. Let's just go in and just check voltage drop on this and see how we're doing. Okay, and there's no measurable voltage drop. I can even come over here, see how that's doing. Nothing. So that ground is doing its job. Now obviously if it was an open circuit, right, you wouldn't hear the blower motor running. So I feel pretty good about that. So I think we got our main ground in good shape, and I think that one other eyelet that goes underneath that ground, right here where I just showed, I think that's for the headlights, and maybe some other stuff, but I think that part's in good shape. And you can see now, I'm just gonna put my hand behind it to shield the hot headers and stuff, the heat coming up there. And you can see now, the green wire's not getting warm. It's 88. Put my hand here. We'll do the red one real quick. Probably pick up my fingers, my body temp more. They're holding the same temp. So now instead of being, what was it, like 180, 190 degrees at one joint, now both of these are running cool. So I have a funny feeling when I start this up and drive it, it'll have enough, it'll let the coolants flow enough that I can keep the fire lit with the air conditioner on, hopefully. Okay, now that I've got the main ground and the main battery feed fixed on the car, it'll at least run with the headlights on in gear. But I thought I would go under the hood and check some of the other stuff, knowing that when I run the air conditioning, I'm still having a slight problem. And I know the blower motor probably draws the most amps of any accessory on this car. If you think about it, in 73, your big option was the air conditioner or a heater. So I think that blower motor, depending on which one you got in there, is going to draw 10 or 15 amps when everything's good. So I ran over here and I touched this wire and it burned my hand. So you can see where this wire is right here. It's right underneath the AC lines. So when these are sweating when it's running, they've been dripping right on this. Of course, you know, it's tucked in closer to the firewall, but nonetheless, I got it pulled out where you can see where some of the plastic on the connectors actually burned away. So this has probably had a problem for a while. Just kind of scanning down here a little bit, you can see where I've got a shrink wrap right there. I actually soldered the original factory harness onto the new motor that I bought years ago, and this is getting so hot I can actually feel the wire's actually hot all oh boy, that's really warm. So we're just gonna put the oh my, look at that. This is the one spot, 200 degrees. Brutal. I'm going to try a concoction of vinegar and salt and see if that will be a strong enough concoction to clean the corrosion off of those terminals. Good thing about vinegar is it doesn't have a tendency to attack paint, but it does attack corrosion. So I managed to get the little connector loose on this spade connector here. And you can see it doesn't look that bad, but where it's been overheating right here, you see how black the wires are right there. I'm not sure cleaning just this will fix that, so I'm going to try to dunk it in there just in an attempt to see if I can just save this connector. I just want to be lazy. And I'm going to dunk this in here for probably, oh, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes and see if I can get the corrosion to come off of that so that it will remove enough of it off of there so that it's not going to overheat. Because basically what it was doing is it was melting this plastic cover on the connector. So it was getting really hot. I just got a little bit of baking soda and some water, and that's going to be my neutralizer. So I'm going to set this right here and cap it so I don't spill it. We'll just take this and we'll just neutralize it in the baking soda for a little bit. So that'll stop corroding. Once the vinegar's done its work, you want to neutralize it and get it to stop doing that. So just usually just swishing it around here a little bit should be fine. I probably could put a little more baking soda in there, but that doesn't look bad. Just get it agitated. All right, let's see how that looks. Oh, looks like it actually ate the corrosion off where it's crimped in. You can see how that's not black anymore. I cleaned that up really nice. Now, obviously, this spade, I could have just, with this out, I could have easily sandpapered that, but that wasn't really the issue. I think the issue was really where this wire either was corroded and or overheated, probably from the AC dripping on it for several years. So while we have this off of the plastic connector, which I think will actually still crimp back over it. Yeah, it'll still go on and kind of stay. That's fine. But I think what I want to do, I didn't clean this other end, but I don't think the other end had a corrosion problem like this other side did. So I'm just going to stick it in there. Yeah, that looks pretty good, really. And just want to make sure that doesn't ground out on anything. Obviously, that would be not good. That's not going to ground anything. I think I'm going to run the blower motor again, get my infrared out, and let's see if that thing will not overheat at the joint anymore, which is what I think it was doing. Alright, we've got the blower on high. It's been running about 2 minutes. Let's see what happens. I'm getting a little heat buildup right there. See right in here. Yeah, see how it's staying cool where it's connected? This is all staying cool on this end. But that joint right there, well, that's crimped. It's getting a little warm. Actually, not bad. Get brave and touch it. It is getting just a tad warm, but I really think that problem was where it's crimped on there. But it's not going to get up to 200 like it did before. He's climbing a little bit. Now I know these wires sometimes will get a tad warm anyway when you're running a lot of juice through them for the blower motor. I can feel this wire is getting a little warm back here on this joint too, a little bit, but nothing major. I'd say that's within the realm of okay-ish. See that it's not getting blistering hot. It's not overheating like it was before. We're topping out around 80. Oh, yep. 82 right there. And let's just see what ambient is. 75, so it raised 7 or 8 degrees. That's probably almost within the realm of normal. I don't think it's like climbing up super high. Yeah, that's not gonna overheat, but it probably could use another dunk. I'll probably still end up putting a weatherproof connector on. I was just curious to see if that will work. So for connections that aren't overheated, it'd probably be a really good candidate. But yeah, that's not anywhere close to overheating. But since I got rid of that path of resistance, let's take a look at the green wire coming out on the firewall over here that actually feeds that blower motor. And I believe it's this wire right here. I got my finger on it. Ooh, shit. Now that we have less resistance on that end, I can feel that wire getting warm. Let's see how hot it's getting. Uh-oh. Now we got another problem. Now we got a problem on the firewall connector. She's getting hot. Yep. 110 and climbing. So I'm gonna have to take this bulkhead connector apart, because I also have a path of resistance there too. And probably while I have this off, I'll take the opportunity and clean all these contacts on these bulkhead connectors, because they haven't been cleaned in quite a while. And that might solve some of the hot idle problems in gear where it's not getting enough voltage. And there's one of the bulkhead connectors, and you can see it looks kind of cruddy because I packed grease in there years ago, the last time I cleaned them, in an effort to slow down the oxidation. And you can see it looks a little greasy in there too. So I'm gonna have to wipe those down, hit them with contact cleaner, and then I think I'm gonna take a miniature, probably a stainless steel brush, like maybe like a gun cleaning brush or something similar to that. And just get in there and brush those really good. You can see it looks like the one terminal, the green one's the bottom one. Yeah. This one right here, it doesn't look like the insulation's overheating, which is good. It means the crimp is probably good. But you can see where that one's a little darker color than the rest of them. And it has a lot of current that passes through it. And it just takes a little bit of oxidation
and then you start getting that heat buildup, and that's what destroys these bulkhead connectors. They get hot and they melt. So we'll just get in there, we'll hit it with a little contact cleaner, brush it off, and that probably will fix that problem. Just taking a little electrical contact cleaner, I'm just going to come in and just blast this off real quick so I don't have a bunch of grease in there while I'm trying to brush that out. It's kind of hard to get it off without making a mess. Yeah, it's not too bad. We'll just take some towels, wipe it off a little. Just blasted most of it out. That didn't look too bad. We'll take the paper towel, go in, just get the grease out. Makes it a little hard to get the contacts clean if you're scrubbing a bunch of grease around. You see where the grease dried up there? Actually, looks like a piece of the grease, or is that part of the... Yeah, it's just grease. That's just grease that dried up. It got hard, solidified. All right, we'll just go in. Also, just pointing out, you definitely want to have the battery disconnected before you start cleaning these contacts, because if you don't, you're going to have a real 4th of July show. So just coming in here, I don't know how well you can see that, and get a look at those contacts. I'm just going to come in with a brass brush. It's pretty gentle, and I'm just going to go in and just scrub it a little bit. Just try to brush some of the corrosion off. Get them as clean as I can. There's still a lot of grease stuck in there, so I may have to go in and hit that with the contact cleaner one more time, just to make sure that I got this stuff brushed off real good. And I'm probably not going to do anything to the female terminals. I'm just going to leave those the way they are. Usually getting the male terminals cleaned off good enough, and then when you press them in, usually you will get a pretty good contact, unless those are really corroded in there, which I don't think they are. I think these are just mildly dirty and cruddy. We'll just hit it with the contact cleaner one more time. Oop, right on the fingers, that was good. Just trying to flush it out without melting the paint off the car. There. You can see there's still some grease in there. It's not hurting anything. But those terminals look like they shined up pretty good. That probably solved that problem. Yeah. I'm just going to slide this back in and see how it does. That's a little trouble to get these spades to line up the way you want them. There we go. Positive engagement. Yep. That's in. All right. Let's give it the acid test. All right, with the blower motor running for a minute or two, that should be enough to heat this connection up if it's going to have a problem. We'll just come in and we'll take a reading off of that little green blower motor wire. If I can do it without my hand shaking. My hands are tired from working the brush. Get right in there. That's barely above ambient. We'll give it just another minute, see what happens. May get a better shot at that metal. I'm doing a very good job. There we go. It'll travel right up that wire if there's a problem. Right in there, as close as I can. I'd say something like this, I'd say as long as I'm within 10 degrees of ambient. And I think it's about 75 degrees in here. It's barely climbing. You know, before it was getting up, it got well over 100, right, like 110. Yeah, so that's working. Good deal.
All right, since that works so well, I'm going to go ahead and clean the other two bulkhead connectors. And I just use a paint can opener to get them off. They got these little clippy things. And it's really easy to take them all off at one time. So I'm going to go in and take the one off that we just repaired. I have to go up underneath and grab it blind. All I'm doing is I'm just hooking the end of that tab and lifting it out so that when I pull on this, it'll come off. They usually come off pretty easy, as long as I can find the spot where I need to grab. There we go. Oh, I clipped this one back. There we go. And these just come right off. Piece of cake. Those are the clips I'm talking about. You just come in with the paint can opener, grab these, and pull them open. This paint can opener is damaged. It doesn't have a hook to it like it should. You can see the two main feed wires going through here where I drilled them. You can see them going through the bulkhead connector here. It's going to make this a little trickier to clean these contacts. And again, they look a lot worse than they are because that's just heavy black lithium grease that I use just to keep them from corroding. And they actually don't look that bad, but since I got it off, I'm going to go ahead and just hit that with a little contact cleaner, and I'm going to go in with the wire brush best I can and just go in and just clean these terminals up. I'm going to do the same thing to this bulkhead connector as well, and then I'll plug everything back together. Okay, looks like those are coming around pretty nice. Those are nice and shiny. So we'll button that back up. That should be fine too. Got the third firewall connector off, and it also looks pretty grungy. In spite of the grease, it looks like the terminals did corrode. That green wire sticking through here, that was an open terminal that I drilled a hole through and ran the tack wire for. When I put the column mounted tack on, that's all that is. But I'm going to come in the same thing. I'm going to come in with a little bit of contact cleaner and just flush that stuff out. And then I'm going to hit it with a good brushing. Just douse that off really good. There's a nice view there. We're just letting them all dry off. And you can see they look a little cruddy down in there. And that was just some black like wheel bearing chassis grease I put in there years ago, which actually does a pretty good job preventing corrosion. But I don't know if the dirt it attracts actually makes it worse later. I'm not sure. But they're cleaned up now. I might hit them with a brush one more time before I put them in. I'm just letting the contact cleaner dry on them. But they look pretty darn good. All right, we're going to check our voltage drop from the alternator over to the positive post and see how many volts we lose from this red wire that runs all the way along the engine and into the firewall. And then, you know, obviously the power cable comes back out to the battery. So let's just see how much voltage drop we got there. Coming over here. Got about 7/10 of a volt drop. I would say half a volt would be the cutoff. So we're a little more than I'd like to see on that. And we're just going to check the voltage drop from the negative post on this Tough Stuff alternator to the negative post on the battery. And you can see there isn't any registerable voltage drop. I could even try putting it on a more sensitive scale. See if we get at least, it'll show something. Yeah, 0.008. So 8 thousandths, I guess, of an ohm resistance. So we know the ground circuit's working on the charging. We're losing a little bit with the air on. You can see it drops down to about 800 RPMs, which is about where it needs to idle for the alternator to start feeding. Now if I throw the lights on, it's going to pull it down a little more. But it doesn't seem to be pulling it down as far as it did before we cleaned the wires up. I'd say we're probably about, looks like maybe 5 or 6 amps higher than we were before. So we definitely did some good. The only thing I haven't checked is the connections to this ammeter gauge. You know, there's two leads that hook up on either side of this gauge, and that's how it measures the amperes. And I would say we're just a little high on resistance, but if you notice, the car is idling okay at 800. And just to show you what happens when we put the blower motor on high, let's see if we drop a little more. It's still higher than it was before. But you see high setting, you know, robs another amp or two. But she's not trying to stall or anything.
But what I have noticed sometimes without warning is the engine idle seems to race up on its own. I'm not quite sure what's going on there, which kind of makes me wonder if it's more than just an electrical issue I was fighting, but it definitely will stay running in gear now. Fairly smooth. I see the needle bouncing just a little bit.
Hey, and just showing some stuff under the dash. There's my alternator charging wire where I drilled out the bulkhead connector and just brought it right through here. And you can see there's the original wire here coming down. It's hard to see the gauge, but you can see there's a smaller gauge wire, the factory one, right here. I'm trying to put my thumb on it. It's hard to see around the emergency brake thing. That gauge right there is smaller than the one I ran through. This is like 10 gauge, and I think the wire it's bridged onto is 12 gauge. So it's got a larger, healthier wire coming through the bulkhead connector than it had before. And since those are soldered connections and they don't get warm, there should be, you know, 0 voltage drop there. And you can also see on my, I believe that's my ignition harness connector, a couple of the heavy duty main feeds off of that have been bypassed over the years. You can see where I've snipped the wires and I've just soldered them together, and they're tucked up, you know, somewhere up here out of the way. There's one of them right there. You can see that one. As well as the main battery feed was also pushed through there. So there really shouldn't be a lot of opportunity for voltage drop under the dash, other than maybe where it connects to the gauges, and also maybe some of these wires going in and out of the fuse box would cause a problem. But I've had my hand under there. I did the you know, the infrared. I couldn't find anything that was running hot on the fuse box. Everything looked good there. Oh, right there's the original buzzer, which Dad unplugged like 50 years ago because it's really annoying when you leave the key in. It makes that annoying noise. That's fun, huh? Hey, amazing it still works. Difficult shot here. See if I can get in focus on the thermo gauge. You can see it's registering well up into triple digits. I'm basically getting an infrared bounce off of one of the studs. Here's a better shot of it here. You can see I'm getting the temp reading off of the back of this ammeter with this infrared. And on these cars, all of the current flows through that gauge as well. So if the gauge fails, essentially the electrical system on the car fails, as well as you also have some extreme voltage drops. So you can see how hot that's getting. Let's see here, 131 and climbing. So yep, we'll definitely be taking that apart and cleaning that. That's probably where, God, I would be guessing, but I'd say that's probably where the rest of that voltage drop is coming from. Okay, just looking up in here, we got the wire disconnected, and the terminal really doesn't look that bad, but the nut was a little loose. And just looking at the stud that it goes on, which I think is right here, that looks maybe a little corroded. So we'll get in there with a small wire brush and clean that off, and we'll just polish this up a little more and put that back on. And I think it doesn't take much on these. At least I hope that's all it is, and not the gauge dying. And I'll clean up both of them while I'm at it. I think there's the other one right there. I have to disconnect that one as well. It's just a 3/8 nut, and I can easily get back there with a nut driver. No problem whatsoever. That way I don't have to remove the instrument cluster, which is kind of a pain. I hate using my new bronze gun cleaning brush to do this, but that's another thing. I got this small enough that'll fit in there. We'll get this metal part cleaned off real good where that brass terminal is going to go on. Yeah, it looks a lot better. Oh yeah, way better. Okay, I got everything nice and shiny. I'm just going to come in and snug it up. Yep. snug this time. I actually feel like it was a little loose last time. So I think that's on there pretty good. And we'll see how she does. Okay. With the infrared poking at it now, let's see how well it's doing. Looks like it's peaking at about 90 degrees. And just poking it at something that's not going to get hot. Let's see what ambient is. Looks like ambient's about 82. And then we'll come back over, point it at our stud. Alright, she's holding around 90 degrees. Yeah, 8 or 9 degrees above ambient, as much current runs through that. That's probably about as good as it was when it was new. So, I think we're good with that. Okay, idling at 1,000 with the air on. We'll drop it in gear. We go into a little bit of a deficit. Then we can also throw the lights on and see what happens. We'll put it on high. Still doesn't put many amps out at an idle, but it's not trying to stall. I guess that's as good as it's going to get. And we're definitely going to have to take a look at the carburetor. It still feels a little choppy. Okay, we're going to check our voltage drop now that we know we got the leads on the ammeter cleaned up real good. Just come in here and grab the positive terminal on the alternator. Put the other negative terminal on the positive battery post. And what do we got? Okay, we're losing less than 0.2 of a volt. So a lot of that could be attributed probably to just because of the fact that the energy has to pass through the ignition switch. So we basically gained a half a volt. We went from 0.75 to under 0.2 of a volt. So that's pretty good. So let's come over here and see what we got for output. Now I do have the engine idled up to 1,000 RPMs in neutral so that I know that this Tough Stuff alternator is putting out some current, because it doesn't put out basically any current at 800. So let's just see where we're at here. I'm just showing here, we're making like 1440. So just to show you what happens, I'm going to turn the, see if I can just leave the leads in there. 1440 there. I'm going to come in and just showing the tachometer real quick. We're right at 1,000. I'm going to bring it back down to about 800. You watch the difference right here when I bring this down to 800. Okay, that's 800 RPMs, and you can see the voltage starting to drop a little bit. See, it's slowly dropping. So at 800 RPMs, it really almost doesn't have enough to, you know, to account for the 3 to 5 amps that the ignition system is drawing. See, it's dropped down into the 13s. It keeps teetering back and forth. And it'll continue to drop. And watch, as soon as I put the headlights on, I'm just going to put the lights on, just watch the voltmeter. You can show the headlights too. Watch how fast the volts drop. That's at 1,000 RPMs, all I have on is the lights. And it continues to drop. So, I don't think the stock alternator did that. But anyway, we know that the wiring's in good shape, and if if this was a 4-speed car, it would be no problem, right? But, you know, down to 800 RPMs, watch what happens when I put it in gear. We'll just keep that right on the voltmeter. We're just going to throw it in gear. I'm just going to put it in drive, and it'll drop down, not a whole lot. See, we're only dropping 50 RPMs. That's actually pretty good. Idle still feels a little lumpy. I still think something's not right with the car. But look how little bit that this alternator, look at this. We're drawing 20 amps off of the battery with the lights on in gear at 750 RPM. So if I turn the lights off, look at that. There still is not enough current coming out of that alternator to run the ignition system at 750 RPMs. So I'm going to say that's alternator, because all I have to do is just put my foot on the gas just a little bit. I mean, right at 800 she starts to feed. Not terrible. Actually, that's a little over 800. There's right at 800. It just barely keeps up. Yeah, it's still about 800. So there it is, just barely keeping up. We'll take a look at the voltmeter one more time. We'll shut her down. Let's take a look over here. So 800 RPMs is not really putting anything. All I have to do is just step the idle up just a little bit, and it comes right to life. But all I can say is anybody wanting to buy one of those, you know, super duty high output alternators, even though that was only a 65 amp, if you've got an automatic and you're wanting to run all the accessories in gear, that's not going to be the solution to your problem. So we took the car up to the Huntsville Motor Speedway for the All Mopar show, and I was hoping to get some good footage in. I was actually going to take the car up and down the strip, and I had entered it in the show. And the car was actually running pretty good last night, but got in it to drive it to go to the show this morning, and it was running absolutely awful. So we limped it to the show and back. It was barely running, and this is what it looks like. Got a problem with the carburetor, classic Holly problem. What I think it is I think it has a broken power valve, which means it's basically dumping raw fuel into the car in an idle, and I'll show you why. Here's the idle mixture screw. It's closed. That's half open. It barely runs. Completely closed. It runs better. Same thing on the other side. This is cranked in all the way. If I move it out a half turn, it actually runs worse. So both screws cranked in all the way and it's still running. So that's definitely has a problem. Okay, I guess this is an instance where it wasn't electrical or fuel. It was electrical and fuel related. We'll get the bugs worked out of this. I'm going to let you guys off now. Thanks for watching. Hit like and subscribe. The next time we pick up on this, we're going to tear into this carburetor. Hopefully we solve the mystery and get this car back into peak running condition like it was a decade ago. Take care.